This is Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth.
Welcome back. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, proudly on, say it with me now, AFR Talk. And we will be joined by Dr. Annette Bosworth at the bottom of the hour. But first, we go to some of the things that have been stated today. And as you know this, and you're up to speed, obviously, through the great reporting of the likes of Chad Groening and Chris Woodward, American Family News, onenewsnow.com. But here were some statements made first by President Obama and his discussion of what happens when you stop or attempt to shut down the government. It's not going to impact the healthcare law. It goes through. And he brought out the people that were ostensibly benefiting from the law as props, people behind him. And this was interesting because he made some statements. I put together a montage. It doesn't change the context of the meeting, fear not. But here are some of the things he had to say. I'm glad he's not politicizing it. Roll it.
At midnight last night, for the first time in 17 years, the Republicans in Congress chose to shut down the federal government. Let me be more specific. One faction of one party in one house of Congress, in one branch of government, shut down major parts of the government, all because they didn't like one law. They've shut down the government over an ideological crusade to deny affordable health insurance to millions of Americans. In other words, they demanded ransom just for doing their job. Now, we may not know the full impact of this Republican shutdown for some time. It will depend on how long it lasts. But we do know a couple of things. We know that the last time Republicans shut down the government in 1996, it hurt our economy. And unlike 1996, our economy is still recovering from the worst recession in generations.
Couple things here. One, it did not hurt the economy overall. Unemployment, according to the Daily Caller, they covered this story today, great report. Unemployment continued to plummet in the months following the shutdown. And we see a surge. More surprisingly, gross domestic product increased during the both quarters covered by the Clinton-era shutdown. According to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, GDP began the fourth quarter of 1995 at $7.7 trillion and ended the second quarter of 1996 at $7.9 trillion. By the end of the second quarter in 1996, GDP topped $8 trillion. This is amazing to claim that it's going to harm the economy like that. Now, we're not dealing with the same thing. We're also dealing with a situation where people were welcoming financial restraint. But I believe they're doing the same thing when it comes to Obamacare as we know it. They are saying this is hurting job growth. This is hurting an economic recovery. Dan the Mancilia, who pointed out certainty being so important to economic recovery and growth. And that is true when we have Obamacare. You delay, by the way, you have some mandates delayed, delay the employer mandate, and you don't delay the individual mandate. Now, we'll get to the glitches a little later on in the broadcast, but keep in mind, the Republicans have passed some measures to attempt to resolve the, quote, government shutdown, and they passed a measure that said everybody had to play by the same rules, including members of Congress. So the Congress and Hill staffers didn't get their exemption. And everybody, businesses as well as individuals, both get a year delay. They have put forth legislation, and the president has been refusing to engage on that, the delay and fair play. I thought this president was all about fairness, but remember, fairness in this case and arguably in any case is relative and subjective. That said, we go to Barbara Boxer, who took great exception to a conscience clause being put in by Marsha Blackburn. And this was in response to the mandate on contraception and abortifacients that Marsha Blackburn put in to the House legislation. Roll it.
Sure that the women of America and you and the men who care about women know that the latest Republican shutdown plan continues their war on women. Shutting down the government is a dangerous game, and the Republicans are playing it. And I want to tell you what those benefits are that they're stopping. Guaranteed affordable birth control, screenings for cervical cancer, screenings for sexually transmitted diseases, or STDs, screenings for pregnancy-related diabetes, screenings for domestic violence, and breastfeeding counseling and supplies.
And that amendment put in was in support of a pesky little thing called the First Amendment. It was a conscience clause for the ability to people to opt out. And Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn put it in there. And that's the objection. Apparently, opting out of that, because nothing's for free, and anybody with an IQ above room temperature understands that. Bottom line, we realize that Marsha Blackburn opting out, conscience clause, is the war on women, according to Senator Barbara Boxer. Just giving you some more background to what the statements that you are making, and also the invoking of the war on women when it comes to this debate, plugging that back in, relying on the low information voters, unfortunately. Our guest is someone who just said, I had enough. I need to get in the ring and get into the arena. I want to see things change, and it's supposed to be a government of the people. So why not? Especially in light of the fact that the state legislature, no, it doesn't elect me. No, we got rid of that. We go directly to the people when it comes to the Senate of the United States. South Dakota Senate candidate Annette Bosworth, Dr. Annette Bosworth, joins us now. How are you, Dr. Bosworth?
Great. Thank you, Crane. I'm very good, thank you.
Oh, let's get right to it. As you see this unfold, what would you be doing if you were the senator from South Dakota right now? How would you be responding to this? Would you be advising that the House pull back, cave on the continuing resolution, and in essence, just drop the idea of addressing Obamacare in any way to keep the government running?
You know, I think that there's a bunch of our souls to be sold during these negotiations, that many of the conversations about Obamacare that aren't happening have a lot to do with what happens with your information. It is one of the core reasons that I stepped into the game, is that as the physician being asked to collect information on my patients, information that is very important for me as a physician, but is a dangerous thing to be handing over to the IRS and asking in the name of the sacred conversations to then not to not even stand up with a voice to say you shouldn't be giving this information to your IRS. So I do think that the Obamacare process it is not right for our country. It should not be shutting down the whole country. And this is, again, one of the brokenness of what has happened in D.C., specifically the U.S. Senate. So, Crane, have you ever been on a board?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. Have you ever been on a board of all men?
No, I have not.
No. When you have a board of all men, and then you add men and women in the discussion, it changes how you have the conversation. And looking at some of the stuck thinking that has led to today, this isn't a problem that showed up in the last 24 hours. These negotiations and this gridlock of not having the skills to meet in the middle where you can have the voice of our American people, keeping our freedoms, and yet navigating solutions that do fit the country. That stuck thinking should be an embarrassment to our United States Senate.
But how do you? But with respect, and I don't. You can address the gender thing as you are, and with respect, I think it's the question is, if somebody says we're not going to do this regardless, and you know what, we know you're going to lose, and we've got people in your own party opposing you. We're going to undermine you because people look at the shutdown and they blame the Republicans, and you're going to pay for this politically. So as you stay in this fight, so to speak, you are losing ground on your ability to do what you want to do, and that would be to stop Obamacare. Your thoughts to that line of thinking?
Well, so the ability to move forward has to have the conversation back at the table that there is no exact right answer at this point, except to say the government is depending on Washington to figure out how to get the business back open, and then find a solution that says you're going to have to find a way to navigate through Obamacare at this point. And I don't like it any better than anybody else, but the compromise is needed to protect the patient and the art of medicine, the privacy of medicine, need to continue to be part of that conversation.
And so, bottom line, you're not going to, with conventional wisdom, and understand what I am asking, I don't agree with, by the way. But the point is, that is what's being said, and that's what's being reported at times of people saying, drop it, let it go. And what you're saying is, no, we can't let this go.
Go ahead. I am very much would be standing with Ted Cruz. I know that that is, especially in the light of a shutdown, this sounds like you're for a government shutdown. I'm not. But it is because there have not been that there's been failure of nerve that we need to have the conversation, and this is where debate and the meeting of the minds come is in conflict. And the compromise that happens is, we're going to have to do this again. We're going to have to surrender over what is very foundational and against our Constitution. That there should not have been failure of nerve as many times as there has been. But if we don't have leaders in our country that are there to put a line in the sand saying this is not okay, and as unpopular as it is, as much as that creates the anxiety in the leaders, the tension in the leaders, it is that moment that is testing to say, who are you? And how are you going to lead this country?
When we look at the information that you're speaking of, not to hopefully interrupt, hopefully to interject here, when you're speaking to the information, we are going to be doing a story a little later on in the broadcast about the glitches within the system, but the use of navigators, the privacy concerns, a whole host of things. So you started out talking about the fact of having a woman at the table, so to speak, and not so to speak, that's what you were getting at, and saying we need to form a consensus, a compromise. First and foremost, would you call a conference, or would you get together with the Republicans in the Senate and call everybody together so that possibly everybody could come together around some things specifically? Because it seems to me that the Republican Party unified on getting rid of Obamacare, and yet as it plays out, they're weakening themselves by moving forward. So is that what you were saying about getting people together on the same page?
Right. So one of the lead skills of a leader is that ability to collect the emotions, the thoughts, and the drive of a team. Let's take the image of an ICU, an intensive care unit, and which I've been on the team for 14 years of different teams. ICU is one of the most intense places, though, where the people around that patient are of different walks of life, they're different genders, they show up to try and save that patient's life. The job of the leader is to not only navigate the science of how to save that patient's life, but to be able to regulate their own emotions, their own anxieties, and then recognize which team members are failing. One of the key things that was a pivotal change in my career was a time when I was on an ICU team and we were carefully studying how can we be the best in the country at saving lives. These patients were intubated, they'd been in, they're in an ICU, and we would have everybody on the team putting in the data for how can we improve ourselves. This was nurses, the respiratory therapists, the doctors, the secretary, all of the people were on the team. And Crane, take a guess, what was the number one thing that decided whether the patient lived or died?
Well, I would hope it wouldn't be, but cost, does that come into it?
Yeah.
Or was it? Go ahead.
cost wasn't it. The number one predictor of life for the patient was the function of the team. If you had someone on your team going through a divorce and the rest of the team did not respect that there was a lack of performance in that team member, the patient died more often. When you had people that were fighting on the team, the patient died more often. This was shocking to me. We had the best science in the country. We were running an algorithm that was amazing. But if the doctor was sleeping with the nurses, everybody died.
And there you go. So it's a functionality, bringing people together, getting them on the same page, identifying strengths and weaknesses, and coming up with a plan to drive out.
That is the point of a leader. And you look at what the U.S. Senate, what is the job of these people that we have elected to run our country? It is to navigate and run a team. And if you've got people that are stuck in their thinking, they should be rescued by fellow team members to say, hey, we see you're stuck. Let's walk through this together.
And knowing what goes before the cameras and what goes behind the scenes so you can work it out and building that trust. By the way, Dr. Bosworth, I went immediately to death panels. My apologies. You were speaking specifically to the ICU, and it's a great question and a wonderful way to go. But we appreciate you, and I'd like to continue our conversation as time goes on. But Dr. Annette Bosworth, we appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on.
You bet, Crane. Have a great one.
You too. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. Immediately, it's like, gosh, are they ratchet? No, it's the ICU, Crane. Come on, clue in. I'm right here. Team building. Very good. Always appreciate Dr. Bosworth coming on the program and discussing these issues. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. Coming up, your phone calls. Should they cave? AFR Talk.